On today's show, we'll dive into the new CBA changes that have been reported across the NBA that could impact the Hawks in various different ways, plus some mailbag questions that look ahead to a very, very big game on Tuesday in Chicago. All of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1444 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime. And I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as always, to make us your first listen each and every day, check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube on the video side. And I do appreciate you listening to the show here in early April. Today's show is going to be covering a lot of different ground. We'll talk about the CBA, all the changes there, at least that have been reported to this point, as well as at the end of the show, we'll talk about the Hawks and Bulls from Tuesday, because in short, that is the most impactful game of the season for Atlanta if you factor in everything with regard to tiebreakers and this late juncture of the season, all of that. And it's a road game on Tuesday. One caveat here at the top of the podcast, I'm still in Houston and I have to cover the NCAA championship game tonight, which is a very late tip-off. So I'm recording this podcast earlier than usual and then holding it for a few hours. So if anything changes like during the game on Monday, you will know why. So there you go on that. And just that one caveat to get out of the way at the top of the show. But first we'll dive into the CBA changes. And I want to just stress this at the very, very top of this discussion. We have not, as of this recording anyway, seen the full document. It's not even been ratified at this point in time. It's just reporting from, yes, credible outlets, Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN, Shams Charania, Tim Bontemps, Bobby Marks, etc. So we're going off some credible sourcing, but still, I will just say that now. We do not know all of this stuff for sure, nor do we have the full context at this point in time. But I know I got a lot of questions about kind of how it was going to impact the Hawks, what was going on. So we're going to start with that now. And first and foremost, the big thing with me anyway, with the new CBA, is to make sure that everything this summer will be on schedule, no labor issues for at least 6 years before the potential opt-out. And that's really nice if you were worried about this summer like I was, because, if summer league got pushed back or free agency got put on hold, et cetera, there were 2 lockouts in the previous 3 CBAs. So it was not always a given that it would be, labor peace. So not having that worry is very nice for someone who covers the NBA and relies on it to have content. So that's a very nice thing at the top of this. And on the luxury tax front, there were some interesting changes there. ESPN is reporting that luxury tax brackets will increase at the same rate as the cap does. That's a change from the previous system, and that means the tax line will be a little bit higher relatively than it was before. Also, the new CBA is putting a second apron reportedly at $17.5 million above the tax line. Teams that go over that second level will not be able to use the taxpayer mid-level exception, nor will they be able to send out cash in deals or trade first-round picks 7 years out or sign players in the buyout market. Plus, it can't take in more money on trades than they actually send out. That's pretty crazy in a lot of ways. That kind of limits what trades can be happening. And look, this is all still rough, and I don't think the Hawks are going to be ever going into that top tax bracket realistically. But there's some controversial changes here, and it seems like some of the mid-tier and lower-tier spending owners kind of got their way on this one when compared to like the Warriors and Clippers who were at the top of this thing. It's not a full-blown hard cap by any means, and owners kind of floated out the desire for a hard cap at some point in the negotiation process, but that was never really going to happen based on the report that was out there when I heard. So the soft cap is still in place, and the top teams have more impact in what the changes are looking like on that front. Elsewhere on the cap side, they're reportedly making salary cap smoothing a reality with up to a 10% increase per year through the new CBA, but that avoids the massive cap spike. If you were a longtime fan, you remember in 2016, there was a huge cap spike that messed up a lot of things, and the players didn't want smoothing, and it ended up benefiting a lot of guys who signed big deals that summer, but also hurt other guys. Famously, like tons of like the Mozgov contract and all kinds of huge deals that summer that happened probably wouldn't happen under normal circumstances. So no big spike this time around. It's probably better for the league, in my opinion. Player stuff. There's been an agreement to increase the upper limits on extensions. What your team extensions now could be 120% of the starting salary in year one. Now it's 140%. That makes it a little bit easier for some guys to sign extensions and get more money for doing it. But the big question I got from Hawks fans, probably above all, was whether this will actually help the Hawks sign DeJounte Murray to an extension. Under the previous rules, basically everyone agreed that there was almost no chance that Murray was going to agree to an extension with the Hawks because they could not pay him realistically what he is worth over the next few years after his free agency actually is supposed to hit in 2024. Honestly, that is still probably going to be the case. This does help the Hawks make a more competitive offer. They can offer now about a 4-year extension worth about $111 million roughly on an extension. That is certainly better than it was going to be before. But just for context, if he were to sign, let's say for the max in 2024, it'd be 4 years and $187 million. Now that's $76 million difference. Now I'm skeptical that he'll actually get that big of a contract, but that's a huge, huge, huge gap. So if you're Murray's agent, and I believe he's rep by Clutch, I can't imagine them signing this deal, although it would always be more justifiable. Murray's not had a great year necessarily, so if I was on his side, I'd probably recommend that he would at least consider 4-11 if it was offered to him. But it's a little bit more realistic, but still probably not something that I would think is going to happen. I asked the people about this; they kind of agree with me on this. It seems like it's going to be a little bit more interesting, but a little bit less than still that he's probably going to get on the open market. And because, as we'll talk about a lot over the summer, the Hawks are not in the greatest spot with keeping Murray because he can easily leave. Like they have no recourse other than paying him an extension that he may not take. So that'd be a disaster for the Hawks after trading so much for him. So that's a topic of conversation over the next year plus. And by the way, also on this front, Jaylen Brown, who I know a lot of Hawks fans are hoping and praying for in free agency or in a trade, can almost get the max now from Boston, where he couldn't before. So that might actually keep him in Boston longer, at least give him more of a chance to have him stick around with the Celtics. Anyway, elsewhere on the player stuff, also got a bump in exceptions, a 7.5% reported increase to the mid-level exception, and a 30% increase to the room exception. Without going crazy into the CBA here, where the cap is going, that makes sense to me. There's sometimes been incentive for teams to stay over the cap and use the MLE rather than actually just being able to spend to the cap and use the room exception. Now the room exception is more competitive, so that might change that incentive a little bit to kind of always have the team, not always, most of the time stay over. Now there might be some wiggle room there. There's also a reported increase on non-max rookie scale extensions to go from 4 years maximum to 5 years maximum. Previously, you could only sign a guy on a rookie deal to a 5-year deal if it was not an extension or if it was the max. Otherwise, you had to wait till they hit free agency. So Colin signed a 5-year deal with the Hawks, but he was already a free agent at that point. It was not an extension. Whereas when Trey signed his deal, it was 5 years, but it was a max extension, which is why it was allowed. So now, if you're from the Hawks standpoint, let's say if they want to sign a Kongwu to a 5-year deal and an extension this summer, they could. I'm not sure they're going to, but they certainly are at least able to, at least by this reporting. Also, long-term, maybe guys like Griffin or Johnson, if they get to that point where they're worth doing a 5-year deal for, that's another sort of arrow in the quiver of the team to be able to offer that 5th year if they want to at a non-max salary, because Okongwu is not going to get the max, but he might be able to, might be worthy of a 5-year offer if the Hawks want to go that route. Also, a reported third two-way slot for every team. I was surprised the players did that because it seems like agents don't like two-ways, but it is also a bunch of extra jobs in the league. That's worth noting. On the team side, they are cheap and flexible. The Hawks have kind of split between like kind of going lower ceiling, like more win now kind of guys like Trent Forrest and Shawnee Brown. But they also can take swings on guys like Donovan Williams, who are just like developmental swings in a lot of ways. So I think with 3 options, the Hawks and really any team should at least have probably one guy on those slots that could be more of an upside play, but there's more flexibility along the way there. The big one that got a lot of attention in the last few days is apparently the agreement to have All-NBA or an award like MVP. You have to play at least 65 games. That I don't like at all. Number one, it's arbitrary. There are players who are definitely All-NBA caliber while playing 64 games or 60 games or whatever. And there's already built-in factors from people that vote on these awards to kind of consider how many games guys are playing. So a great example is this year. Giannis right now, with 4 games left, has played 62 games. So, and basically everyone agrees that Giannis is a top 3 MVP candidate. So if he were to sit out, let's say 2 of the last 4 games, he would be ineligible for All-NBA. That is insane. He's an absolute lock for first-team All-NBA right now. So if he misses 2 more games, he is not eligible for third-team All-NBA. That seems nuts to me. Seems like sort of a solution in search of a problem. I get what they're trying to do to have guys play more, but this is not the way to do it in my mind. So that's kind of where I'll leave it for now. And maybe that'll change in the future, but that's been in the reporting at this point. Also, All-NBA, it's going to be positionless, apparently. I'm not someone who really cares about this too much, but I think positionless is fine with me. I think my ideal thing would be to be 2 backcourt and 3 front court if I had to choose. But positionless is better than their current setup because right now you have this situation with Jokic and Embiid, who are like maybe the 2 top guys in the league, or at least top 2 of the top 3 or 4, and they can't both be first-team All-NBA. This kind of fixes that. Also, with the way the positions are kind of going, I'm totally fine with not having positions at all on All-NBA. It's fine with me. They've agreed to eliminate the restrictions limiting a team to 2 Supermax players designated. That's like a very small impact, but that's something that's worth noting. Also, they have improved the restricted free agency process apparently with a 10% increase on qualifying offers, and they shortened the match period for 48 hours, 24 hours. Honestly, RFA is brutal in general for the player, and that's not going to change. So that's my whole takeaway on that one. They will create a new second round pick exception so the teams actually can sign their guys to longer than 2 years without going into the mid-level. I'm looking at details on that. It'd be nice to know what those are, but in general, I like that approach because the teams shouldn't be penalized for signing their second round picks to longer than two-year deals. There's a little bit of uncertainty here on this next one, and it's that there's been some reporting about players attending the combine undergoing physical exams before the draft that'll be distributed to select teams based on their projections. This is a big one for me. I think agents have often tried to hide medicals from teams they don't want to go to, and having that standardization is good. But is there a penalty for not going to the combine at all? That's a big question. There's just seeing sort of the fallout and the details on that one in a big way. Also, one and done is staying in place. So players can come out of high school and go right to the NBA. By all accounts, it seems like there's no one that's like pushing for that hard enough to actually get it done. And with NIL in place and with Overtime Elite and G League Ignite, there are ways to make money. So that's at least one small improvement on the player side. I still think the guys should be able to go to the league when they want to, but at least there's some middle ground there with the other options to make some money other than going to college. Also, Shams reported the NBA is going to be giving players the option to invest in WNBA or NBA teams, as well as sports betting or cannabis companies that they were not allowed to endorse previously. That is going to be very, very controversial, especially with the sports betting side. I'm going to hold off for now on the actual language of that, as we haven't seen it yet, but that's one that I will circle and come back to. And then finally, the in-season tournament could be happening as soon as next season, with pool play games reportedly happening in November, and then an 8-team single elimination tournament at a neutral site in December. It's probably going to be Vegas by all accounts. And then each in-season game, by the way, will count towards the regular season standings as well. So the only extra game will be the final, which will be the 83rd game for those two teams. Rumored to be at least $500,000 per player for the winning team. That's been reported by Shams. We'll push back on that, so I'm not really sure if that's going to be the final number or not. It could be even more than that. I don't love this. I don't viscerally hate it either. Maybe it'll grow on me in the future. I think it's interesting and probably smart that the tournament games are going to be basically regular season games that have a little bit extra meaning rather than actually playing extra games. But I think that generally speaking, playing less games overall is the way to do this. I'd be in favor long term of a much shorter schedule for the NBA with more time in between games. Maybe this plus that would be enough to satisfy league partners from the money side. But there you go on that. Obviously, I want to stress one more time, as I did at the top, all the CBA stuff is still in flux as I record this. Even people that I know around the league that are chomping at the bit to see this document have not seen it yet. So we'll see. That we're kind of going off of what has been reported nationally, but people were asking. So there's my little synopsis of some Hawks impact stuff. And generally speaking, not bad for the players. And no labor stoppages is a positive thing for me on the outside looking in. Okay, before we get to the rest of the podcast, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. If you've been trying to find tickets for a big event at the last minute at some point in your life, it could be really incredibly stressful. It probably is not the best idea for your emotions or your wallets. After all, buying tickets should not be stressful. And with Gametime, you have the ability to get the fast and easiest way to buy your tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on must-buy tickets at a best price guarantee, you can avoid stress and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have at the event. Spring is officially here, of course, and there are tons of events around me in Atlanta and really across the country at this point. Plus, that includes the Braves ramping up in Atlanta, concerts that I want to go to, and the Hawks having some home games coming up as well at State Farm Arena. With Gametime, you get the flash deals, the last second tickets, and it's so easy to find and buy the best tickets for any kind of event you're looking for. You can also see where you'll be sitting with images from your seat, and they'll also have protection if your event happens to get canceled. Forget planning months in advance. Gametimes actually has the deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and with the Gametime guarantee, you'll have the best price possible. If you find tickets in the same section on the same row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You can buy tickets just a matter of seconds, plus those tickets would be sent directly to your phone to make things very easy and convenient for you. Snag the tickets right now without the stress at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, and we'll dive into some mailbag questions now. One comes from Logan, who says, I saw something about the Hawks maybe getting a second round pick that is not their own pick. Can you explain that to me? So basically, the Hawks get the Pelicans pick in the second round this year if the Pelicans fall outside the top 45 with that pick. So basically, if the Pels make the playoffs, then just go on that. It's not exactly that, but that's basically what it roughly amounts to. At this very moment, and with no games happening today because of the championship game in the NCAA, the Pelicans will be picking 47. So that actually would go to the Hawks at number 47 overall. It's hard to root for that day to day, but basically Hawks fans should be at least mildly hoping that the Pelicans land at 46 or 47 because that's a fairly useful pick. Not a great one, but still it's better than nothing. And crucially, it does not roll over at all. So if they don't get it, they don't get it ever. It extinguishes at the end of this. And the Hawks second round pick is going to be going away. So there's a scenario where the Hawks only have one pick in this draft, and it's their own first round pick. So if you want a small rooting interest in the last week of the season, I would certainly be jumping on board to hope the Pelicans can get over the finish line and actually stay in that 46, 47, 48 range and send that pick to the Hawks for a little bit of extra ammunition. Now's the time, though. I will joke or not so joke that the Hawks might sell that pick anyway because Tony Ressler likes to sell draft picks no matter what anybody says. Okay. Next question comes from John, who asks, have Trey and DeJounte shot 50% from the field or better in the same game all season long? It seems like a rare occurrence, if anything. So I did the math on this. Trey has shot 50% or better from the field in 18 games this year. DeJounte has shot that or better in 25 games this year. And they've actually done it together 5 times this year. I'll stop now and just say it is probably good, obviously, when they both shoot well in a game. And there are a lot more games that would qualify if you lowered it down to like 45%. And I would always point out field goal percentage is not really the best way to do this, especially for guards like Trey with his free throw creation. I would always lean to like true shooting percentage or effective field goal percentage. I wouldn't worry about these guys shooting that much from the field or higher too much. But it's an interesting thought process because I went through all the games and 5 times all year out of 78 games. The first 2 came against Detroit. So that's glaring because Detroit's the worst team in the league. So that's probably a little bit part of that. Then the last 3, it was Detroit in October, Detroit in December, Toronto on January 14th, Phoenix on February 9th, and then Miami on March 6th. They actually went 4-1 in those games. The only loss was the Miami game. And in that game, the Hawks scored 128 points and still lost because they had a 133 defensive rating. So, in short, it is probably good, which makes sense, when DeJounte and Trey both shoot well in the same game. You can't pick on that happening all that much, but certainly for only happening 5 times, 78 games, it's not probably great. And if you do the math on it, they certainly could use a little bit of an uptick on that one. But overall, that is where they should be at this point in time. And that's where we'll leave it for now because, 5 times out of 78 games, not great. I got another question about the draft. Just as another reminder, I've said this a number of times on this. I'm just going to answer this quickly. The people keep asking me about the Kings and making the playoffs and all that. The Kings pick that the Hawks got in the Kevin Huerter trade does not come this year. That's the big thing. I know there's been a lot of confusion about that, but that pick was never coming this year no matter what. It was always a 2024 first round pick. So when you start rooting for the Kings, if you were the Hawks, it's next year. That it's lottery protected the first year, then top 12, top 10, etc. But just know that the 2024 draft is the one where you need the Hawks. If you are the Hawks, you need the Kings to make the playoffs next season, not this year. So it would be a bit of irony if the Kings were to fall off the cliff after this year, after they had their great season to make the playoffs this year. If they were to miss playoffs next year, it'd be pretty brutal for Atlanta. But this year, it's only their own pick. The Hawks have their own pick, unencumbered. So right now, it's like 15th, 16th in the league. That's a small consolation, as we'll get into later on in the podcast. If the Hawks were to miss the playoff, which is definitely possible at this point, they would be in the lottery and at least be guaranteed a top 14 pick. If they make the playoffs, 15, 16, something like that, maybe 17 will be their range for this year in the postseason. Okay, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll get into some Bulls preview stuff at the end of the podcast. But first, a final word from our podcast sponsors on today's show. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things, and sometimes life gets you bogged down and you might feel overwhelmed or as if you're not showing up the way that you want to or need to. And that sounds like you at all. If giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a fantastic option for you. It is convenient, It's flexible, affordable, and entirely online. I know people in my life, especially, who benefited greatly from BetterHelp, and all people that found something different that they actually were looking for and what they actually needed with BetterHelp. Fill out a brief questionnaire right now to get matched with a licensed therapist, and if you do switch therapists at any time, you can do so without any additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. One more time, BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, we'll dive in now to the Bulls game on Tuesday. And look, I talked about it a little bit on the show yesterday, but it's basically the most impactful game of the season for the Hawks. Number one, Chicago is a direct competitor for play-in position in this particular run. The Bulls also lead the season series 2-1 against the Hawks. So if the Hawks were to lose, they would lose the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Bulls. And in addition to that, the winner of this game, no matter who it is, Hawks or Bulls, gets the 3-team tiebreaker advantage in a Bulls, Hawks, Raptors tie at the end of the year. That could very easily happen. So that's a pretty interesting point of leverage as well. The Bulls are playing really well in recent days. Unfortunately for the Hawks, that made things more difficult for Atlanta. They're 9-4 in the last 13 games with a plus 6.9 net rating. They have been shooting the ball much better recently, taking care of the ball much better on offense, a top 3 defense in the league over that sample size. And by the way, the Bulls have the second best net rating in the entire league since the All-Star break, behind only Boston. So that's pretty scary on some level because it's a game in Chicago. The Bulls are tied for 5th in the league in defensive rating for the full season. They are in the top 5 in turnover creation as well on defense, top 8 in defensive rebounding, and free throw rate allowed. They are a good basketball team defensively. Offensively, they are certainly, I would say, exploitable in some respects. They take care of the ball on offense. They are bad on offensive glass for sure. But, look, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are tough for the Hawks to match up with, especially without DeAndre Hunter, who's not playing in this game. So that's another difficult matchup. Point per defense has been rough for the Hawks at times. Also, the Bulls are 21-18 at home this year, whereas the Hawks are 16-23 on the road. So a little bit of edge toward Chicago in this matchup. And then you get to the injury report. So on the Bulls side, no Lonzo Ball. That's expected. He's been all year long. Alex Caruso and Javonte Green are probable for Chicago. So that's not a huge deal there. On the Hawks side, Trae Young is questionable to play with a non-COVID illness. I have no idea how serious that is, but the fact that he's questionable is at least a little bit of an eyebrow raiser going into a big game on Tuesday. And then DeAndre Hunter is still out. I said this on the show yesterday, but it would not surprise me based on the wording with Hunter if he's out for a while longer. I don't really know. They said it's day-to-day, but the fact that he's out here is interesting enough and notable with that bone bruise and muscle strain to his left knee. With all those, and I'm looking to try to get the most accurate line now, the Hawks are, I think at the time of this recording, about 3.5 or 4-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel. So that's probably right. The Hawks and Bulls are, I would say, similar in terms of team quality this year. They have kind of the same record. The Bulls have been better lately. Hawks probably better on the full season, but having to go to Chicago, the Bulls are healthier than the Hawks at this point in time. So that kind of gets you to that 3.5, 4-point range at FanDuel, whereas the Hawks are, of course, also they've won or lost consecutively in 10 straight games. So they're in line for a loss through that metric. But anyway, we'll see how that all goes. And at the end of the podcast, here's some projections, a little bit of a look ahead. Technically, the Hawks have like a 0.01% chance at the 6th seed if they were to win out and get an incredible amount of help. But I think you can reasonably cross that off. So you're looking at between the 7 and the 10 seed. As of today, Basketball Reference has a slot-by-slot projection, and they have the Hawks with a 1.5% chance to get the 7 seed, a 36.2% chance at the 8 seed, a 27.4% chance at the 9 seed, and a 34.9% chance at the 10 seed. So basically, 90 something percent between 8 and 10. Obviously a lot. They're more likely to be 9 or 10 than they are to be 7 or 8, and that will be impacted a lot by the result on Tuesday. Also, Toronto plays Charlotte on Tuesday. They're favored in that game. Miami plays Detroit on Tuesday. They're favored in that game. So after Tuesday, the Hawks do have the back-to-back with travel against Washington on Wednesday. Hopefully for the Hawks, it is a back-to-back for the Wizards as well, and they play the Bucks on Tuesday. Even before that, though, Washington's kind of in shutdown mode. They're 4-12 in the last 16 games. They've been leading into the tank quite a bit in the last few games. So that's a decent enough spot, even though it's back-to-back with travel on Wednesday. But the Hawks have been really bad on back-to-backs. That's worth noting. They do have more incentive to win than the Wizards do at this point. Our friends at 538 have the Hawks projected for 41 wins, not surprisingly, along with Toronto at the same projection, Bulls at 40 and Miami at 41. That would probably change if the Hawks lost to the Bulls on Tuesday. Keep that in mind as well. I think the Hawks might have a little bit of a schedule advantage at the end of the season because they play Philly and Boston, who are both awesome teams, but are not probably going to be at entirely full strength. Maybe they could be if they're still trying, but there's always a chance that one of those teams, maybe even both those teams, are not playing all that hard by the end. But still, a huge game on Tuesday for the Hawks. Now, there are some fans, and I don't blame you for this, that kind of almost want the Hawks to lose now and miss the playoffs, get in the lottery. I don't blame you, but I think the majority of people still want the Hawks to get in the play and try to make some noise. So through that lens, they certainly want to win Tuesday. If they lose on Tuesday, every game becomes huge from that point forward, and some tiebreaker stuff. Because look, the Hawks could reasonably emerge in the play-in as the 10 seed. It would not be impossible. They have Trae Young, who I would argue is the best player out of that 8, 9, 10 slot with Chicago and Toronto. Having Trae is helpful in that situation. It happened last year where the Hawks won back-to-back playing games to get in. But if you're the 10 seed, you got to win twice on the road. That's pretty tough sledding, only to earn the number 8 seed, and then also have to play probably the Bucks in the first round. Kind of tough. So anyway, we'll leave it there for now. But a big one on Tuesday, and we'll have a full breakdown of that game after it is completed on Tuesday. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Hopefully that was enough to satisfy you on this off day for the entire league into Tuesday. But again, circle that one. It's an 8 o'clock start in Chicago, so a little bit of a later game. Plenty of flip on that one. Then we'll dive into the rest of the schedule after that. Please subscribe to the podcast. Check us out across podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Follow the written content I'm producing on the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Ratings and reviews, all that stuff is encouraged at Apple, Spotify, etc. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your evening into Tuesday, and we'll see you after the game against the Bulls.